Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 2, Liberal and Neoliberal Approaches. Let us first have introduction about the unit. Liberalism, also known as the pluralism, projects a different image of world politics as compared to realism. However, much like realism, it too has a rather long tradition. There are many strands of liberalism, but some of the common themes that run through the liberal thinkers are that human beings are perfectible, that democracy is necessary for that perfectibility to develop, and that idea do matter. Unlike the realists, the liberals have enormous belief in human progress and the faculty of reason that each individual is endowed with. Accordingly, liberals reject the realist notion that war is the natural condition of world politics. They also question the idea that state is the main actor on the world political stage. Although they do not deny that it is important, but they do see multinational corporations, transitional actors such as terrorist groups, and international organizations as central actors in some issue areas of world politics. In relations between states, liberals stress the possibilities for cooperation, and the key issues becomes devising international settings in which cooperation can be best achieved. The picture of world politics that results from the liberal view thus is of a complex system of bargaining between many different types of actors. Military force is still important, but liberal agenda is not as restricted as is the realist one. Liberals see national interest in much more than military terms and stress the importance of economic, environmental, and technological issues. Now let us have discussion about the liberal approach to the study of international relations. Liberal approach to the study of international politics has its roots in the development of liberal political theory in the 17th century. Closely connected with the emergence of the modern liberal state, the liberal tradition generally takes a positive view of human nature. Interestingly, some of the major contributions until the mid 20th century were not international relations scholars, but political philosophers, political economists, and people generally interested in international affairs. For example, John Locke, widely considered the first liberal thinker of the 17th century, saw a great potential for human progress in modern civil society and capitalist economy, both of which he believed can flourish in states that generated individual liberty. Liberals are generally of the view that the period since the late 17th century constitutes a historical watershed during which a multifaceted process of modernization has introduced or enhanced the possibility of a dramatic improvement in the moral character and material well being of humankind. In other words, the liberals argue that the process of modernization unleashed by the scientific revolution led to improved technologies, which in turn made it possible to devise more efficient ways of producing goods and mastering nature. This was reinforced by the liberal intellectual revolution, which had great faith in human reason and rationality. Here lies the basic for the liberal belief in progress. The modern liberal state invokes a political and economic system that will bring in Jeremy Bentham's famous phrase, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Now let us look at some of the assumptions of the liberal approach. Some of the important underlying assumptions of the liberal approach to the study of international politics can be identified as follows. Individuals are the primary international actors. Liberals put the individual at the center of the universe, and all progress is measured in terms of the interest of the individualist, as the two are perceived as inextricably intertwined. In other words, progress for liberals has always meant progress for individuals. John Locke, for example, is accredited with the creation of a constitutional state through a social contract to protect the liberties of the individuals. Such a state enables and establishes the rule of law that respects the rights of the citizen to life, liberty, and property. This does not mean that states are relegated to marginal status in the liberal perspective. Far from it, the liberals view states as the most important collective actors in our present era, but they are seen as pluralistic actors whose interests and policies are determined by bargaining among groups and elections. The next one is state interests are dynamic and are both self regarding and other regarding. Liberals are of the viewpoint that the interests of the states are not static but dynamic. States' interests keep charging with time because individuals' values and the power relations among interest groups keep evolving over time. Also, most liberals believe that states do not only have certain self interest to preserve, but also regard states' policies as other regarding to some extent, since they believe that the growth of liberal democracy increases people's concern for other humans. These ideas can be traced back to Locke, Rousseau, and Kant. As far as the specific interests of the states are concerned, liberals accept that state survival and autonomy are important, but they are viewed as secondary interest to the primary interest of the individuals. While liberals are generally optimistic over the long term role of the states in supporting peace, welfare, and justice, they do realize that exploitative interest, including power over others, as an end in itself are unlikely ever to disappear. The next one is both individual and state interests are shaped by a wide variety of domestic and international conditions. Liberals are of the view that the interests of both individuals and state are affected by a lost factors at the domestic and international levels, while conceding that eventually such interests are determined by the bargaining power that they possess. The manner in which they define their interests are shaped by a number of factors, both within the state and outside the state, that is, the international arena. At the domestic level, factors like the nature of economic and political system, patterns of economic interactions, and personal values may play decisive role. At the international level, presence of factors like technological capabilities, patterns of interactions and interdependencies, transnational sociological patterns, knowledge, and international institutions allow states to affect each other in different ways. States, the predominant collective actors, are viewed by the liberals as entities that are embedded in both their own society and the international system, and their interests and policies are affected by conditions in both arenas. However, there is a significant difference between the realists and the liberals on the matter of institutions and political hierarchy in the international system. The liberals feel very uncomfortable with the realists' rather simplistic conception of the international system as anarchical. In sharp contrast to the realists, liberals are of the view that given the pervasiveness and wide influence of the network of international institutions, it would be native not to integrate it into the overall conception of the international system. And in the last, manual interest can sustain cooperation in the international system. With the growth of the liberal democracies, interdependency, knowledge, international social ties, and international institutions, the liberals have come to believe that cooperation can be possible among states without resorting to coercive means. Unlike the realists who believed that the existence of a hegemonic power is a prerequisite to cooperation, the liberals are of the view that the cooperation can be achieved through non coercive bargaining based on identification of mutual interest. An obvious question that arises here is what makes the liberals so optimistic about the possibility of cooperation? Their optimism about increased cooperation based on mutual interest emanates from a strong belief in the mutuality of interest, which they think will keep growing with increased interdependencies and the spread of democratic values. Further, liberals believe that the improved knowledge and communication will immensely enhance the ability of the states and other actors to better understand their common interests. Now we are going to discuss neoliberal approach to the study of international relations. What distinguishes the neoliberal from the traditional liberal scholars? Do the neoliberals present a contrasting view of world politics from that of the traditional liberals? What is it that necessitates the prefix neo before liberalism? Are the neoliberals closer to the realist and non realist in their orientation than to the traditional liberals? These are some of the questions that we shall try and explore in the following section. The most important distinguishing feature of the neoliberals are their declining confidence in human progress. Unlike the traditional liberals, the neoliberals are far less optimistic about progress and cooperation. This, however, does not mean that they are as pessimistic as the realist or neo-realist as seen in the previous unit. As a category, the term neoliberals refers to post-war liberal scholars who retained much of the beliefs of the traditional liberals, except perhaps sharing their optimism. In the pre-Second World War period, most liberal writers had a strong belief in the growing, slow but steady realization of human freedom. However, in the post-war period, the new generation of scholars became much more reluctant about committing themselves to the liberal notion of progress. This lack of optimism among the new generation of liberals was grounded in a number of considerations. As noted by Jacher and Matthew, liberals have not wanted to be branded as idealists, as were many interwar liberals. The international events of this century, including two world wars and the Cold War, have made them wary about being too optimistic. And in keeping with the ethos of contemporary social science, many have felt more comfortable about explaining than predicting. In the academic world, neoliberal generally refers to neoliberal institutionalism, one of the strands of liberalism which shall we discuss in detail later in this unit, or what is now called institutional theory. However, in the policy world, neoliberalism has a different connotation. In the domain of foreign policy, a neoliberal approach seeks to promote free trade or open market and Western democratic values and institutions. Inspired by such an ideology, thus, most of the Western liberal democracies have rallied around the United States in its call for the enlargement of the community of democratic and capitalist nation states. This brand of liberalism or neoliberalism draws its ideological strength from the belief that all financial and political institutions created in the aftermath of the Second World War have stood the test of the time, which provides the foundation of contemporary political and economic arrangements. What further adds weight to such a view is the belief that these financial and political institutions were created and are being sustained by policy makers who embrace neoliberal or realist or neo-realist assumptions about the world. However, there are many who question such assumptions of liberalism, as noted by Stephen I. Lamy. In reality, neoliberal foreign policy tend not to be as wedded to the ideals of democratic peace, free trade, and open borders. National interests take precedence over morality and universal ideals, and much to the dismay of traditional realist economic interests are given priority over geopolitical ones. The post-war liberalism or neoliberalism is broadly divided into four main strands of thinking: institutional liberalism, sociological liberalism, republican liberalism, and interdependence liberalism. It is important to discuss these strands at some length as they hold the key to our understanding of some of the important theories that we are supposed to learn in this unit. However, we shall confine ourselves to the only those aspects of these strands that are immediate concern of us for the purpose of understanding of this unit. Now we move to the wide concept of world order. There is no single homogeneous conception of order in world politics. Instead, one comes across competing conception of order in international relation theory. However, given our immediate objective and purpose, we shall focus mainly on the liberal conception of order and touch upon the realist version only to the extent it can help draw a contrasting picture. The crucial picture of difference between the two becomes visible from the different terms that they employ to describe order in international relations. While the realists prefer the term international order to describe the nature of the order in international politics, the liberals use world order for the same. Does it mean that the difference between the two is merely semantic and not substantive? The answer is a simple no. The realist conception of international order is state centric, which emphasizes stability and peace among states. The elements of such an international order are based on the traditional models of order, such as the structure of the balance of power, sovereignty, the forms of diplomacy, international law, the role of the great powers, the current forms of collective security, and the codes circumscribing the use of force. Such a conception thus focuses exclusively on the structure of the post Cold War system, especially upon the number of great power actors and the distribution of capabilities among them. In other words, it defines order largely in terms of the operative security structure, primarily understood in political military sense within the international system. The concept of world order, as conceptualized by the liberals, on the other hand, is a much wider category in nature and scope, in sharp contrast to the realists who treat states as a basic unit of order. The liberals take individual human being as its key units of order and construct order in terms of rights, justice, and prosperity. Unlike the realists, the liberals assert that order in world politics emerges not from a balance of power, but from the interactions between the many layers of the governing arrangements, comprising laws, agreed norms, international regimes, and institutional rules. The liberal conception of world order thus clearly has a widening agenda of order that encompasses, among other things, the relationship between economic and political dimensions, new thinking about security, debates about consequences of globalization, the role of human rights, and strategies for human emancipation. Its central claim is that patterns of integration and interdependence have become so deeply embedded in the Cold War period, albeit for strategic and geopolitical reasons, that they now have a self sustaining momentum that precludes any return to war and entropy. An important landmark in the development of the liberal conception of world order was the setting up of an organization called World Order Models Project (WORM). Established in 1968, it aimed at promoting the development of alternatives to the interstate system with a view to eliminating war. For WORMers, as they have come to be called, the unit of analysis is the individual while the level of analysis is global. Some of the key figures associated with WOMP, like Mandewis and focused on the question of global government that today form the core of much of the work going on under the name of globalization. In the more recent years, particularly since the mid 1990s, WOMP has become much wider in its focus by concentrating on the world's most vulnerable people and environment. Here we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.